Okay, great, great. Good evening, everybody. Hello, hello to all the people in South, well, to all the South Africans and our international guests who could be here. Good evening and welcome. I would like to extend a huge thank you to Claudine and Robin and Judy and all the people who put their work together to set up this webinar. This is a very important webinar on a very important topic, gender-based violence. Um, Gender-based violence, with the topic of today, safe spaces for women. During the lockdown, the president said that gender-based violence is the second pandemic. And is that really for deaf people? So I would like to apologize to Robin that my presentation will be more about the bills and less about my social work experience, because I think it's very important that people know what the bills are. So why did I become a social worker? I went to Gallaudet in 1988, and I really wanted to be a teacher. A teacher specifically for deaf children. And in 1988, deaf people, were they exactly allowed to be teachers? Big question marks. So then I thought, what if I study to be a teacher and then I come back to South Africa, then I can't teach? So I then changed my mind to social work. Social work because I love interacting with people. And, you know, anybody who wants to be a social worker must have a heart, for people, the willingness to give their time to interact with people, hear their problems, figure out how to help them out. And so this was really important. And after my BA degree, I decided to stay and continue. So please keep in mind that the BA degree at Gallaudet is not specifically for deaf studies, it's a general social work degree. And then because you study at Gallaudet, they add deaf issues to the program. And then I could specialize in my later degree with deaf people, deaf studies, and families. So then when I came back to South Africa, I was unemployed for a time. And Ronald Davids was on maternity leave. So for 3 months, I worked as a temporary social worker at DEFSA. But full time, I was really at DCCT, the Deaf Community of Cape Town. I was the social worker there. So before I had left for Gallaudet, I was one of the founders of DCCT. So I wasn't a teacher, but as a social worker, I don't only interact with deaf clients. Um, you know, Many deaf people need or want a deaf professional who they can communicate with without needing an interpreter. So it was also an opportunity for me as a social worker to be a leader and to give leadership training to adults, deaf adults, and the deaf youth. So I became a two-in-one. And at the Deaf Youth Leadership Camp, I was a facilitator there. I also had an opportunity to teach with Renal, to teach the social auxiliary work, so short SAW, the social auxiliary work training. Um, so Renal did more of the presentation on that, but we worked together. I was also part of, or am part of, DEFSA's social work task team. And the reason for this team's existence is to advise DEFSA on social work issues. there are many social workers who are not deaf. There is one hard of hearing deaf social worker who is learning sign language, and she's there in the Western Cape. The other social workers in the deaf offices hearing. So I hoped, really hoped, that there could be more deaf social workers or social auxiliary workers because there is a huge need for that. And the social auxiliary workers, if they can take up the opportunity to study and to qualify. Like I was saying, that, deaf people would prefer interacting with a deaf professional and maybe with their family. Perhaps in their family, they have a hearing family who still doesn't understand the concept of deafness. We would cover that in our interactions. And one big thing that I learned from my time at Gallaudet University is that you always take the side of the deaf person. In a hearing situation, most hearing professionals have more sympathy for the hearing family members. But I am firmly on the side of the deaf person. And I am here to help the hearing family members because their biggest challenge in the family is communication issues, communicating with a deaf family member. So I'm going to put that aside. I now want to go to gender-based violence. But before I go into that topic, I entered Parliament in 1999, and in Parliament I was in the Portfolio Committee of Communications. In 1999, I lobbied hard for access for deaf people, access to TV. We don't hear the radio. We can't hear the radio. We need TV because that is visual. So I lobbied so hard for subtitles on TV or interpreters on TV. We don't yet have 100% full access, not yet, but the deaf community out there is also still lobbying to reach that 100% accessibility to television. And so now this is my fifth term in Parliament. Um, the ANC is my political party. They decided to put me in the Portfolio Committee of Justice and Correctional Services, jail, basically. I did not want to be in this portfolio committee because I don't know anything about law. I'm not a lawyer. But I decided, well, let me stay and see how it goes. And I then further stayed in this committee because this particular committee is responsible for South African human rights. And South African human rights do not always do enough for the disabled community. And I wanted the opportunity to ask questions directly about what what the South African Human Rights Commission does for deaf people. Also, in my committee, we have the Legal Aid Board of South Africa. And this is particularly important because as a social worker, if I go I would go with the deaf person to the legal aid center to get assistance. And legal aid is free for the people who cannot afford a lawyer. And to them, I also wanted to ask them pointed questions about their services to deaf people. So currently, the committee is busy with the 3 gender-based violence bills. We are busy amending these 3 acts. Unfortunately, I won't have time to go into detail with each act, but I will pick up some important factors about each bill. So, firstly, it's the Criminal and Related Matters Bill, Amendment Bill. And then the second bill is the Domestic Violence Amendment Bill. The third one is the Criminal Law, and then in brackets, Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Bill. So these bills were already sent out for public comment for the public to make oral or written submissions. There were many submissions that were received. After the submissions were received, I felt quite down because no deaf representative came to make a submission. And I'd really wanted the deaf people to come and make a submission, explain what deaf women go through in these circumstances. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So I had to keep speaking up about deaf people. And I was the lone voice, essentially, bringing deaf issues to the fore. So, and that's why I'd like to thank Robin for setting up this webinar. So a few points that I'd like to share about each bill. Firstly, with the Domestic Violence Amendment Bill, in future, we're all aware of the protection order. You know, if somebody's harassing you and you want them, you want them to not be in your space, in future, you will be able to apply online for the protection order. You won't have to go yourself in court, stand in a queue, feel alone. You won't have to do that. You can apply for a protection order online. That will be possible. Also, many people said the Domestic Violence Act has a very high level of English. And so the the document must be put into plain English so that more people can understand it. What will be added to the bill is the elderly people. So people over the age of 60 who get abused, who get abused in a domestic situation. And the Domestic Violence Act does not say anything about them currently, and that will be amended. Also, the police cannot enter the property without a warrant. If these amendments are passed, the police can enter a home without a warrant. So that's the Domestic Violence Amendment Bill. Now, the Criminal Matters Sexual Offences Amendment Bill. I am very, very particular about this bill because, they would always refer to mentally disabled. And I'd ask them, what about deaf people? What about the deaf people who've never been to school? How do they express themselves that they've been abused or raped? What about the deaf children? How do they sign what they've experienced? So that is very important to me, and all the disabilities must be included in this bill or in the act. Then the Criminal and Related Matters Bill, Amendment Bill. This is very important because as a social worker, I know that a deaf person will go to court by themselves. An interpreter will be there, but there won't be any support about, these questions, why the questions asked in this way or etc. But now there will be an intermediary. It's like a middle person. And I would like all the social auxiliary workers to play the role of an intermediary. So that person will support that deaf victim. You know, if the English, for example, if the English is really difficult, the social auxiliary worker can relay that information. And I'm also lobbying that, you know, yes, the courts have interpreters, but I mean, the interpreters are either really old from back in the day, or it's interpreters who never socialize with deaf people. And then when a deaf person goes to court, they don't understand the interpreter. And however, the magistrate will only allow that court interpreter to interpret. They won't allow interpreters from the outside. And so I am lobbying that in this law, it allows the DEFSA can bring in an interpreter, not that the judge has to make a decision on which interpreter is used. The deaf people should have an interpreter that they understand. So these are the kind of amendments that we are putting in place into the bills. The bills have not yet been passed. Amendments, we still debating and amending the language and seeing how the submissions can be incorporated into the bills. So when Parliament opens again next year, the you know, the discussions will continue, and then we will go through each bill clause by clause to ensure that the bills contain what South African women want, what South African women have been lobbying for. I think that would be the last thing, but